takeoffs. This caused a debate that shows no sign of ending soon. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Scampton in Lincolnshire.
Well, let's get more on this now. I'm joined by the CEO of the Migrants' Rights Network, Fiza Qureshi. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. As we saw in that report, clearly some very strong feelings locally about the use of the site of the dam busters to house migrants. Concerns over the plans to make this site into to keep the base's historic runway, but also make it into a national heritage site. There are concerns they could be scuppered. Do you have any sympathy with those concerns?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us on. Yeah, I think there's consensus for sure that this should not be turned into a detention centre. I think it's for reasons of the fact that we are, again, criminalising people for having come to the UK to seek safety. And we know that because their access to liberty is going to be curtailed. We know that they're going to be very restricted on who they can interact with, from people coming into the detention centre. So I can totally understand the frustrations of the local community around this. And we totally believe that it should go to the community and what they need locally. As the person who was interviewed earlier said, there's no infrastructure around there. So anyone who is in that detention centre is going to be absolutely, isolated in the sense that no one can go in and meet them, but even more so when there's no legal and immigration services locally that can kind of support them when they're going through their process.
So how unusual is it for a site like this, an RAF base, to be used to house migrants?
It is unusual, but obviously you have seen previous kind of attempts to use different sites. You've seen the Napier Barracks, which I believe is still running. You've had the Manston processing centre. So it's the Home Office's attempt to deal with this very poorly in our experience. And instead of housing people in the community so that they can build relationships and they can be welcomed into the communities, they're just isolating them in these kind of rural areas. And I think the concern as well is that having these centres, they become a source of tension and frustration. Well, one for the local community, and that's going to be taken out on the asylum seekers, not on the government who's made this decision. And it will probably, sadly, become a beacon for the far right, who are already protesting outside hotels. And so they'll do the same outside these detention centres, making the conditions that those people are facing even worse, because they can, hear and see the presence of people who don't want them, who are, saying that they don't want them here in the UK.
And yet the Home Office says they basically have no choice. They talk about unprecedented pressure being placed on our asylum system, brought about by a significant increase in the dangerous and illegal journeys into the country. They say that they've got a struggle to find accommodation, and they basically don't have a choice.
I think there is always a choice. There's a choice in terms of dealing with the asylum backlog, and I think that hasn't been adequately addressed, even with some of the provisions that they've put in place recently. There's different ways that they could deal with this, and I think one of the ways is to ask the NGOs and the organisations that are directly working with asylum seekers and refugees, what could they do to support them and make sure that they are welcomed into those communities and not have to resort to yet another detention centre, which is going to cost millions of pounds. It's going to take time to set that up anyway. And so what can we do in terms of alternatives? So I think there are different ways, but the Home Office has to be willing to engage and listen to the third sector and the refugee organisations.
Well, Fiza Qureshi from Migrants' Rights Network, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.